Munich. Early morning air hangs cold over the Olympic village. Doors are forced open. 11 Israeli athletes are taken at gunpoint. Hours pass. Negotiations stretch into silence. At an airbase outside the city, a rescue attempt collapses in confusion and misfire. By the time it ends, all 11 are dead. The perpetrators are identified within days. Names circulate through intelligence channels. Addresses are known. 12 governments are aware of who they are and where they move. The system requires warrants, jurisdiction, procedure. It produces nothing. Across the same timeline, a different decision is made. No court filings. No public record. Just a list of names and a directive that does not expire. The law needs proof. They need an address. Records confirm the sequence without ambiguity. 8 members of Black September breach the Olympic Village and seize 11 Israeli athletes. Negotiations extend across 18 hours with no resolution. A German police response is assembled at Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base. Post-action analysis confirms total failure. All 11 hostages are killed during the attempted rescue. 5 attackers are shot. 3 are captured alive, then released 6 weeks later following the hijacking of a Lufthansa aircraft. The ratio is documented. Identified perpetrators. 0 prosecutions. In October, authorization is signed at the highest level of the Israeli government. No declaration of war is issued. No international mandate is requested. The directive contains a list. 11 names. No expiration date. Then the geography dissolves. Rome, late evening. A residential building with narrow corridors and dim lighting. Waiter returns alone, carrying books under one arm. The elevator waits at the end of the hall. 2 men stand already in position. No uniforms. No insignia. Distance closes to less than 3 meters. 12 rounds are fired in controlled succession. The sound does not carry far. The elevator doors open. Then close. Paris. Beirut. Athens. Cyprus. London. Brussels. Nicosia. The pattern repeats without announcement. Different apartments. Different passports. Same outcome. No radios crackle. No backup moves in. Each team operates inside a vacuum. 8 to 12 individuals. No official identity. If compromised, no extraction is guaranteed. The state will deny them. They wait in parked cars for hours. They walk stairwells instead of using lifts. They memorize routines measured in minutes. When the moment comes, it is brief. Always brief. Then nothing. Silence returns before anyone understands what happened. He moves through Europe without leaving a trace in any official system. Mike Harari, field commander of the unit tasked with the list, does not stay in one city long enough to be remembered. Hotels change every 10 days. Names change more often. His posture remains the same. Slight forward lean. Hands still when others speak. He listens without interruption, then gives instructions in sentences that do not require clarification. The teams already know. They have seen this before. He does not raise his voice. He does not repeat orders. Targets are confirmed, then confirmed again. After Lillehammer, after the wrong man falls, he reads the report himself. Once. Then again. Then a third time. No comment is recorded. The adjustment is procedural. Every future target requires 3 independent confirmations. No exceptions after that. There is one moment he allows himself. A hotel window in Brussels. Rain against the glass. For a few seconds he watches the street below without seeing it. Then it is gone. He turns back. Continues. In another office, under fluorescent light that hums just enough to be noticed, Werner Genrich reviews the same names from a different position. Interpol has files on multiple individuals linked to the Munich operation. Addresses are current. Movements are tracked. The system requires an arrest warrant issued by a court with jurisdiction. None are granted. He writes in a notebook each morning. Names. Locations. Updates that lead nowhere. The process is measured. Controlled. Waiting for authorization that does not arrive. Then the reports begin to change. A name in Rome. Dead in an apartment corridor. Another in Paris. Found before sunrise. Then Beirut. Then Athens. His pen stops once. Midline. Ink touches paper but does not move. He looks at the report again as if the sequence might correct itself. It does not. He draws a line through the name. Not resolution. Just removal. The international system moves first. It follows procedure. After Munich, 3 surviving perpetrators are placed into custody, processed through legal channels, and held under jurisdiction that requires formal charges and sustained detention authority. Records show they are released within 6 weeks following an aircraft hijacking used as leverage. The mechanism functions as designed. It cannot extend beyond its limits. Across Europe, law enforcement agencies track individuals linked to the operation. Addresses are logged. Movements are observed. Interpol circulates intelligence across multiple governments. The constraint remains constant. No unified jurisdiction. No extradition agreements that apply. No legal basis for preemptive detention. Files accumulate. Surveillance continues. The outcome does not change. 7 years pass through this structure. Reports are filed. Statements are issued. International bodies condemn the act. No tribunal convenes with authority over the network sheltering the perpetrators. No defendant stands trial in an international court for the Munich killings. The system preserves its rules. It produces no verdict. In parallel, a smaller mechanism operates without those constraints. There is no courtroom. No appeal. Only a list and the passage of time. Teams move across 12 countries without fixed base or public trace. Each operation is built on confirmation, approach, execution, disappearance. The sequence does not vary. It is repeated until the name is removed. At least 11 identified targets are eliminated over the course of the operation. They are found in apartments, on streets, inside routine moments they believed were secure. No single strike defines the campaign. Continuity does. The list shortens one name at a time. There is no announcement when it ends. There is one failure that cannot be absorbed into numbers. Lillehammer, 1973. A man named Ahmed Bachiki is misidentified and killed. He has no connection to Munich. The error leads to arrests. 6 operatives are captured, tried, and sentenced in Norway. The state denies involvement. The operation pauses. Then resumes. The adjustment that follows is internal and permanent. Verification is multiplied. Assumptions are reduced. The cost is already paid. 2 systems run side by side across the same years. One accumulates evidence and waits for permission. The other confirms and acts without it. One records locations it cannot touch. The other reaches those locations repeatedly. Both make errors. Only one completes the list. George Jonas documents the structure and intent in Vengeance, published in 1984, based on interviews and accounts later partially corroborated by declassified Israeli materials released in 2006. The account aligns on one point: the operation was not designed for speed but for completion over time. Viktor Ostrovsky, a former Mossad officer, writes in by way of deception in 1990 that the operational arm Responsible functioned in small, compartmentalized teams across Europe. He describes a method built on surveillance, confirmation, and execution without reliance on host nation authority. His description matches later intelligence assessments of decentralized action units. A declassified CIA assessment from 1980 reaches a similar conclusion in institutional language. A small intelligence unit, operating without diplomatic constraint, can sustain targeting across multiple jurisdictions over extended periods. The phrasing is clinical. The implication is not. Internal reporting from the German Federal Criminal Police in 1979 confirms that at least 8 individuals connected to the Munich network were killed in incidents already under observation by German authorities. The report states the limitation directly. Insufficient legal basis for preventive detention. They knew. They did not act. From the opposing side, a public statement issued by the Palestine Liberation Organization in 1979 labels the campaign as state terrorism. The wording is political. The reaction is operational. Security structures are altered. Personnel are relocated out of Europe. Communication protocols are tightened. They changed because they were being found. By the mid-1970s, the lesson is no longer debated inside Allied intelligence circles. It is acknowledged in doctrine reviews and internal briefings. Large systems begin to remove layers that delay action. Certain approvals are pushed downward. Surveillance is no longer tied to immediate prosecution. Targets can be tracked for years without a case file moving in parallel. The objective shifts. Not arrest first. Locate, confirm, wait. The change becomes visible in practice before it is written into policy. An American analyst returns from a liaison assignment in Israel in 1977 carrying a revised workflow. Identification is separated from action. Confirmation is repeated across independent channels. Then nothing happens. Not for days. Not for months. The target continues to move. The file remains open. The team watches. When the window appears, the decision is made at the operational level. No request moves upward. No delay is introduced. The action happens before the previous system would have finished drafting authorization. This model spreads quietly. Databases expand across agencies. Names are retained even when no indictment exists. Patterns are built over time instead of rushed into courtrooms. The language changes. Persistent. Targeting. Patient tracking. Terms that imply duration without deadline. Years later, the scale increases but the structure holds. Individuals are followed across borders for a decade or more. Movements are logged. Networks are mapped. The moment of action is brief compared to the years that precede it. The decision comes before the system above can respond. The outcome is measured in absence. Targets that once moved freely begin to disappear from the network. Speed becomes policy. The list begins with 11 names. It ends with none. 7 years pass between those two states, not marked by speed but by refusal to stop. Time carries the lesson forward without changing its shape. Systems built on procedure still measure success in trials completed and verdicts delivered. Other systems measure what remains unfinished. The gap between them is not technology. It is tolerance for waiting. It is the ability to hold a target in sight for years without acting, then act in seconds without asking. Institutions can be constructed with agreements, budgets, and shared language. But endurance across 7 years, across 12 countries, with no guarantee of recognition, that is paid for differently. When the system above runs out of tools, do you wait for new rules to be written, or do you act within the time you have left? Tell us below.